We got a #1 victory royale. Yeah, Fortnite, we bout to get down. Get down.
That's a lovely, lovely voice.
In 1989, Tim Burton and Michael Keaton proved audiences could accept a dark and gritty Batman, setting out to make a much darker and even more serious sequel. And then Karens had to bitch and moan. You can't have toys in McDonald's advertising a film where people are murdered and a scary freak bleeds out to death. Haha, black gunk pours out nose. Forcing Warner Bros. To tone it back and inadvertently murder the Batman films forever. Until one man would rise out of the shadows as a vengeful savior of the Batman franchise, creating a much more grounded, real-world take on the beloved Caped Crusader, and then following it up with what many would argue is the greatest superhero film of all time. And then Heath Ledger fucking died.
You're a big guy.
For you. That's a lovely, lovely voice.
The traitor! Where is it? Where is it? Tell me where the traitor is. Then you have my permission to die.
This time.
Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy shares a lot of similarities with the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. Insofar as the first one's pretty good, the second one's a fucking masterpiece, and the third one is a disappointing piece of shit with a few salvageable scenes. But everyone knows why Spider-Man 3 fucking sucks. No one seems to talk about or really even give a shit about The Dark Knight Rises. And so, as a passionate Bat fan who isn't afraid to deliver the brutally honest truth, it is time I crashed this movie. With no survivors. Okay. There actually will be survivors because the entire cast is on Earth and that's an extremely long flight just to kill some people. Anyways, I think the first major fuck-up that doomed this film before it was even shot was the choice of Bane as the main antagonist. The Dark Knight trilogy was intended to give us a taste of what a real-life Batman would be like. Well, sort of. As a real-life Batman would probably just get shot and fucking teabagged by some shithead gangbanger. But as a result of this, many of the villains chosen for the films have a sense of believability to them. Joker is pretty much just a homicidal domestic terrorist, and Scarecrow is basically a chemical terrorist. And you could try to argue that fear gas isn't realistic, but to that I would have to ask, have you ever tried mixing bleach and literally any chemical in existence? That shit will kill you in 1,000 different concoctions. Even outlandish characters such as Ra's al Ghul or Raish or whatever the fuck his name is were fairly believable once you got rid of the ridiculous comic book stuff. Remove the whole Lazarus Pit and him being 3,000 years old and he's essentially just a ninja cult leader. So, basically a Far Cry villain. And each of the characters listed has costumes that are fairly easy to adapt into a real-world setting. Cult robes, a burlap mask, or creepy-ass clown makeup are all very believable outfits a criminal would likely don on their way to their regular 9-to-5 job of selling drugs and killing people. Or in Roz's case, massacring an entire city. You know what isn't believable? A souped-up Mexican wrestler the size of the Incredible Hulk who can lift cars like he was fucking nothing. Now don't get me wrong, I like Bane and think he is a really interesting opponent to Batman. He has a very dark and intriguing backstory with the whole Santa Prisca experimentation and bat nightmares. But he just doesn't belong in a real-world Gotham. And clearly I'm not the only one who thought that, as they changed his costume to whatever the bizarre fuck this shit is. Now don't get me wrong, it works and is pretty intimidating looking. Until you hear his fucking British-ass tea and scones voice.
It would be extremely painful.
I really want to know whose fucking idea it was to use that voice. When I saw this in a theater, everyone started laughing as soon as they heard his voice. I'm not fucking joking. Everyone thought the big bad scary villain's voice was a fucking joke. Hell, it's literally become such a fucking joke to the point where DC themselves have even fucking clowned on it. But more on that later. For now, the voice showed a real change from the original iteration. No longer a tough and sophisticated Mexican wrestler / warrior supervillain guy, they changed him to be a British white guy simp who somehow wound up in the horrible Santa Prisca prison. He's also vaguely on some type of venom drugs that basically work like regular fucking steroids. Initially, the whole film made him seem like the super intelligent Bane of the comics, with his strategic master plan to bring Gotham to its knees, working to its highest degree, further than even the Joker had gone. But then at the very end, the twist hits, and he was really just a loser orbiter of Talia al Ghul, who was enacting her plan in the hopes that maybe, just maybe, she'll let him hold her hand for 5 seconds. Simp! Alright, so that might not be totally comic inaccurate, as he does really have a thing for Talia in the comics, but at least in the comics he actually got with her. For one night. And he took over the Gotham criminal underworld also he could rid himself of nightmares, not to please a psycho cultist thought. It's the literal Virgin movie Bane versus the Chad comic Bane. And I would also note this is the second time Bane was portrayed in live action, and both times he was just a big dumb muscle for a female villain who was too weak to fight for herself. What is with DC and giving Bane the fucking shaft in every adaptation outside the comics? Even the Arkham games that got everyone right made him into a fucking brain-dead Neanderthal. Thankfully, Arkham Origins corrected their mistake. And honestly, Arkham Origins Bane pre-TN1 is probably the best adaptation of him out there. And what really sucks is now Bane will always be seen as a stupid bumbling moron with a goofy British accent. As normies parodied the shit out of him so bad, DC started doing it too. What with Bane's portrayals in the Lego Batman movie and the Harley Quinn TV show. And while I do love the Lego Batman movie and the Harley Quinn show, the way Bane is now seen as a bigger clown than the actual fucking Joker irritates the fuck out of me. Especially since growing up, I remember how he was one of the toughest and scariest villains on Batman's entire rogues gallery. He was literally the only guy to actually beat Batman and put him out of commission for months using both brains and brawn. But one movie comes out and suddenly it's so fucking funny to shit on him for being a big fucking pussy. It's time to move on. This film also suffers from Christopher Nolan's bad sound mixing that'll have you turning the volume up and down for action and dialogue scenes. Come on, man, you've been doing this for years. Turn up the fucking talking or turn down the explosions. Are you trying to fucking destroy my ears? Beyond my grievances with Bane and the sound, the whole plot of this film is extremely fucking stupid. We got aging, retired Batman throwing parties that he doesn't even participate in for stupid rich people he doesn't like. And when he was Batman, shit like that made sense, since he had to keep up the lazy, immature, rich party boy stunt so people wouldn't figure out that Batman showed up at the exact same time he did and is using advanced tech, not unlike the exact kind of tech his company produces. Now that I think about it, the whole concept of Batman's kind of fucking stupid when you start putting logic into it. I guess the people of Gotham are so focused on not getting riddled with bullets and robbed every fucking day, they don't have time to worry about the fact that Batman and Bruce Wayne have never been seen in the same room together. Regardless, he doesn't have to throw these parties. All it does is let a bunch of assholes drink up his booze and trash his mansion. And also give people the opportunity to rob him. Enter his maid, Catwoman, who winds up stealing Martha Wayne's infamous pearl necklace. I fucking warned you that shit like that would happen, didn't I, Brucey? But really, she was able to complete her main goal of collecting his fingerprint to sell to a bunch of terrorists. Terrorists who just so happen to work for this glorified gorilla henchman. He then uses said fingerprint to bankrupt Bruce Wayne through a series of financial transactions in the stock market that leaves him penniless. But to do this, Bane orchestrated a violent attack on the stock exchange. So, trading would have been immediately stopped sooner than you could say no Russian. And even on the off chance of it actually going through, it likely would have been canceled pretty quickly. At least, according to actual intelligent people who understand the stock market. Even then, for fuck's sakes, I'm a middle-class poor person who knows other poor people whose banks have canceled large fraudulent transactions way less than billions of dollars. But whatever, Bane emptied the accounts and Miranda Tate is now CEO of Wayne Enterprises. But it's cool because Bruce Wayne, the guy who's only had it in for one girl during this entire trilogy, who wound up dead and could have any girl in the universe but isn't interested in any of them, instantly fell for her. This whole romantic plot was so rushed and just plain weird. It was like they barely met each other, and before you know it, they're fucking each other close to the fire. I remember when I first saw this, I was so confused. I barely even knew who she was, and now she's fucking Batman? It was completely out of character for Batman, both in this trilogy and the comics. As, you may not realize, but Bruce Wayne doesn't actually sleep with any of the girls he has around his arms. He's a fake womanizer and quite frankly, doesn't even have the time or the effort for these stupid gold-digging hoes. Hell, in the comics, Talia had to fucking drug and then rape him to pull off a baby Batman-making scheme. So they did a whole 180 on his character for cheap shock value when it's revealed he made the biggest mistake any man could make. Sticking your dick in crazy. Be it a man or a woman. But for now, it's confusing and dumb. And I also want to point out how Bane actively participated in a plot that involved the woman he so desperately loved fucking another guy. This moves him up from simp tier status to being a full-on fucking cuck. Bane might have broken Batman, but Batman fucking cuckolded him. So who's the real winner here? And so from there, Catwoman takes Batman to Bane, they fight, he gets his back broken, Bane drops him off at the underground Santa Prisca prison to watch his city crumble before allowing him to die. And he learns about Bane, the only person to climb out of the prison. Bane steals tumblers, activates a neutron bomb, frees prisoners, traps the police in the sewers, and creates kangaroo courts for the wealthy. Probably the only thing he did that was admirable, honestly. And to rub further salt into the wound, read an unreleased Jim Gordon speech that revealed their hero, Harvey Dent, was a fucking psychopath and Batman is innocent. Well, outside of his vigilante activities and that one act of terrorism he committed in China. Then months later, Bruce is somehow alive and well. I guess Bane makes sure to feed the prisoners really well or some shit. What a nice guy. So Bruce winds up climbing to the top as the crowd of prisoners cheer him on, and then somehow finds a way back to Gotham, even though he has no idea where the fuck he is and no money in his bank account to afford transport to Gotham. And even if he did, Gotham is closed off from the rest of the world because of said neutron bomb, so there's no travel in or out of Gotham. Presumably he stumbled through the desert for a bit until he found water and swam his way there, or maybe he stole a boat or some shit. We'll never really know, as it's not included within the film. Fuck Birds of Prey. A film about Bruce Wayne escaping the desert and getting back to Gotham is the real spin-off we deserved. So Bruce makes it back to Gotham, dons the cape and cowl, and prepares for his final stand, convincing Catwoman to help and freeing the police from the sewers, as an all-out battle for Gotham begins. And despite the fact that the police are all unarmed, most of them somehow manage to not get shot, and also get Bane's men to stop shooting as soon as they're within punching range. Just goes to show you, nobody can shoot unarmed people better than the police do. Then Batman beats Bane's ass with a lucky punch, Talia twists the knife into Bruce metaphorically and physically, and then she goes to leave Bane to die with Batman. Catwoman blows Bane's bitch ass up before he can kill Batman. Batman uses his shitty glider to carry the bomb out of the city, and he dies a legend and hero, getting a statue. Or did he? Because he fixed the autopilot on the ship, and Alfred might have seen him with Selina at a cafe. He probably did die, though, because even if he fucking jumped out, the poisoning from the radiation blast would have inevitably killed him. Especially since this is shitty Nolan versus Batman, who wouldn't keep a lead-lined suit around for just such an occasion. Oh, and we also get a Robin tease for a movie that will never be made. So, having gone over all of that, you can tell this movie is pretty fucking dumb. And a lot of the issues stem mainly from Bane and Talia, who just don't really fit into this universe. Now, I have to admit, I am biased, as I'm not a big Talia al Ghul fan. As far as I'm concerned, she's just another damaged chick with daddy issues. Maybe she should borrow that damaged tattoo from Jared Leto now that he's not using it. It's just a thought. And I think both her and her father and the whole League of Assassins shit in general are all way overused. They show up way too much in the comics, TV shows, movies, and pretty much fucking everything. Almost as much as the even more overused Joker. Seriously, Batman has tons of compelling villains. Stop using the same three guys over and over. But I think we can all agree objectively she really doesn't belong here. She was never mentioned by Ra's or anyone in the prior two films, and her whole relationship with Bruce is horribly forced and rushed. Especially since we also have the Catwoman x-Batman love story that is better fleshed out and just works way better as the two characters/actors have way better chemistry. I mean, it's Batman and Catwoman, the ultimate one true pairing, so no relationship's gonna top that. Especially not a half-assed mediocre one like that. And outside of Talia, I've already ripped the fuck out of Bane. He fucking sucks and is nothing like the captivating character from the comics. Originally, Nolan intended for Joker to be the main villain in this film, but unfortunately, remember, Heath Ledger fucking died and we got this shit. Now, in a perfect world, Heath Ledger would be alive and Nolan could have used the original idea and it would have been the greatest trilogy of all time. God himself would come down from heaven to watch the 3-movie special feature premiere, and the whole entire universe would be in peace and harmony. But the devil fucking hates us, so what should old Chrissy boy have really done? Make Riddler the main antagonist. One of the main themes from The Dark Knight that is poorly carried over to this film is truth versus lies, what with the Dent Act being used to lock criminals away without parole, named after the false hero who was allegedly killed by the real hero who took the blame. And Edward Nygma would fit perfectly into the story, as he has a deep compulsion to tell the truth due to childhood trauma. And as a result of this, he vehemently does not like liars. So he would likely work to expose the corruption and probably kill a bunch of cops/politicians in the process. He may be honest, but he's still a fucking sociopath. And he would be undoing all of the good of the Dent Act, which would certainly be enough to bring Batman out of retirement. And this would also fix one of the main issues with the overall trilogy, which is Batman's whole character being almost completely wrong. You see, contrary to popular belief, Batman isn't just a full-on brutal billionaire vigilante. He's a detective first and foremost. His title is literally the world's greatest detective, and he was introduced in Detective Comics. Most of his stories from the comics see him investigating crimes more often than fighting them, and his greatest superpower isn't his body or wealth, it's his mind. He's one of the most intelligent characters in all of comics, which is why people often debate and argue he could beat almost anyone with enough prep time. And it's extremely fucking frustrating how often they get this wrong in the films, and as a result, the public gets his whole character wrong. He's not a dumb brute who punches first and asks questions later. He always assesses every situation and uses violence as a last resort when he knows there is no reasoning with his adversaries. Unlike the police. And this is why it's disappointing to see him portrayed time and time again as an oafish idiot to be outwitted by the Joker and various other mentally deranged lunatics. A person who relies on brawn rather than brain. And Riddler could have fixed this issue by forcing them to show Batman's intelligent detective mind, solving his riddles and proving to be the world's greatest detective. And beyond that, Riddler is right up in Christopher Nolan's wheelhouse, as the weakest part of the entire trilogy has always been the fight scenes. And this is especially evident within this film, as the fights feel more like drunken bar brawls or just straight up poorly choreographed sequences. And it's so obvious that the stuntmen are pulling punches, and in some extreme cases, they have to beat themselves up because nobody told them what to do. The psychological villains were way more memorable than the physical ones in this trilogy. Hell, Joker is arguably the best part of this trilogy to the point where he won an Oscar. So, Riddler would have naturally been the obvious choice to tie up the loose ends from The Dark Knight. Thankfully, it seems we are at least getting to see Riddler have his go in a darker, more grounded live-action setting, made by people who actually understand Batman and the fact that he's mainly a fucking detective who uses his other skills to enhance his crime-fighting capabilities. But to end this on a high note, I will say not everything in this movie completely sucked. Anne Hathaway is an amazing Catwoman. It felt like Selena Kyle was ripped straight from the page and onto the screen. And she really fits in this dark, gritty, real-world Gotham. Also, John Blake is a pretty cool character, but honestly, if you cast Joseph Gordon-Levitt in anything, he's going to be great and likable. And then Alfred, Lucius Fox, and Gordon are also taken straight from the comics with no changes to their characters at all. Well, except for Alfie abandoning Bruce. Alfred would never do that shit. And while this film was a big letdown, it could have been worse. Could have been directed by Zack Snyder. That's right, both cuts of Justice League fucking suck. I don't care how bad Justice League is, it doesn't make Zack's original version any better. So in conclusion, Matt Reeves is the fucking king, and his Batman will probably be the best of all, so fuck off, I'm done.